Hello, welcome back. I'm John, an old YouTuber. I'm starting to get a little bit tired. It's a fine weather outside, but I think it's freezing cold. It's 2:20. I did read about this Panzerhaubitz 2000 from Germany they're using in Ukraine now. That's like 155 millimeters caliber. So I find this self-propelled artillery. I think that's the 155 caliber cartridges. So let's read about it. I need a minute to go to my bed and I should read this next time. 155 millimeter. Then have to read tomorrow M1 Abrams. That's 49 pages, so we need a lot of power on the camcorder for that. But let's read one more.
Self-propelled artillery. Britishers 90s firing in Basra, Iraq 2008. A Panzerhaubitz 2000 of the German army arriving in Afghanistan. A2s 19M Tombster S of the Russian army. Self-propelled artillery, also called locomotive artillery, is artillery equipped with its own propulsion system to move toward its firing position. Within the terminology are the self-propelled gun, self-propelled howitzer, self-propelled mortar, and rocket artillery. They are high-mobility vehicles, usually based on continuous tracks carrying either a large field gun, howitzer, mortar, or some form of rocket forward/missile launcher. They are usually used for long-range indirect bombardment support on the battlefield. In the past, self-propelled artillery has included direct-fire vehicles such as assault guns and tank destroyers, which were typically well-armored vehicles often based upon the chassis of a tank. In lieu of standard tanks, general-purpose main gun that fired both high-explosive and anti-tank ammunition, direct-fire vehicles had specialized roles, with assault guns providing close-fire support for infantry and tank destroyers mounting an anti-tank gun to take one enemy armor. Modern self-propelled artillery vehicles often mount their main gun in a turret on a tracked chassis, so they superficially resemble tanks. However, they are generally lightly armored, which is insufficient to withstand direct fire combat. Nonetheless, this protects their crews against shrapnel and small arms and are therefore usually included as armored fighting vehicles. Many are equipped with machine guns for defense against enemy infantry. The key advantage of self-propelled over towed artillery is that it can be brought into action much faster. Before the towed artillery can be used, it has to stop, unlimber and set up the guns. To move position, the guns must be limbered up again and brought, usually towed to the new location. By comparison, self-propelled artillery can stop at a chosen location and begin firing almost immediately, then quickly move on to a new position. This shoot-and-scoot ability is very useful in a mobile conflict and particularly on field in open battlefields. 1. Conversely, towed artillery was and remains cheaper to build and maintain. It is also lighter and can be deployed in areas that self-propelled guns cannot reach. Since the Vietnam War, heavy transport helicopters have also been used for rapid artillery deployment, albeit at considerable expense and risk, mitigating one of towed artillery's disadvantages. Both self-propelled and towed artillery remain in the arsenals of many modern armies. 1. History. Precursors. During the 30 Years' War, early 17th century experiments were made with early types of horse artillery. Batteries towed light field guns where most or all of the crew rode horses into battle. The gunners were retrained to quickly dismount, deploy the guns and provide instant fire support to cavalry, and act as a flexible air reserve. The Russian army organized small units of horse artillery that were distributed among their cavalry formations in the early 18th century. While not forming large batteries and employing only lighter 2 and 3 pound guns, they were still effective and inflicted serious losses to Prussian units in the 7 Years' War. This inspired Frederick the Great to organize the first regular horse artillery unit in 1759. Other nations quickly realized the capability of the new arm, and by the start of French Revolutionary Wars in 1790, Austria, Hanover, Portugal, Russia, France, Great Britain and Sweden had all formed regular units of horse artillery. The arm was employed throughout the Napoleonic Wars and remained in use throughout the entire 19th century and into the first half of the 20th century, when advances in weapons technology finally made it obsolete. 2. World War I. British gun carrier Mark I, 60 PDR. The British gun carrier Mark I was the first example of a self-propelled gun, fielded in 1917 during World War I. It was based on the first tank, the British Mark I, and carried a heavy field gun. The gun could either be fired from the vehicle, or removed and set up as normal. In effect, the carrier replaced the use of a separate Horsatium or internal combustion engine-powered artillery tractor, and allowed a new way for the gun to be used. Between the wars. The next major advance can be seen in the Birch gun developed by the British for their motorized warfare experimental brigade, the experimental mechanized force, after the end of the war. This mounted an 18-pounder field gun, capable of both the usual artillery trajectories and high-angle anti-aircraft fire, on a Vickers medium tank chassis. It was designed and built for investigations into a general approach to warfare. All arms, infantry and artillery included, would be able to operate over the same terrain as tanks. Their army also experimented with truck and tank-mounted artillery, but produced none in quantity. World War II. At the outbreak of World War II, virtually all artillery was still being moved around by artillery tractors or horses. While the German Blitzkrieg doctrine called for combined arms action, which required fire support for armored units, during the invasion of Poland and France this was provided by the Luftwaffe using Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers effectively acting as artillery. Conventional towed howitzers followed. Disabled German Wesp 105 self-propelled artillery vehicle. Soviet ISU-152 heavy assault gun. As the war progressed, most nations developed self-propelled artillery. Some early attempts were often no more than a field gun or anti-tank gun mounted on a truck, a technique known in the British Army as carrying portee. These were mobile, but lacked protection for the crew. The next step was to mount the guns on a tracked chassis, often that of an obsolete or superseded tank, and provide an armored superstructure to protect the gun and its crew. Many of the early designs were improvised and the lessons learned to better designs later in the war. For example, the first British design, Bishop, carried the 25 PDR gun howitzer on a Valentine tank chassis, but in a mounting that severely limited the gun's performance. It was replaced by the more effective Sexton. The first battery of self-propelled artillery guns was created when Hauptmann Alfred Becker, a mechanical engineer and battery captain in the 227th Infantry Division, mounted his 10.5 cm FH-16 howitzers on the chassis of captured British Vickers Mk.6 light tanks to mobilize his guns. 3. His 10.5 cm FH-16 Geschosswagen 6736E was the forerunner to German tracked field guns such as the Wesp and Hummel. The Germans also mobilized their anti-tank guns, using light obsolete or captured tracked vehicles. Examples include the Marder I, using captured French Lorraine 37L tractors, the Marder II, using the Panzer II light tank chassis, and the Marder III, which was based on the Panzer 38T Czech chassis. These led to better protected assault guns Sturmgeschütze with fully enclosed casemates, built on medium tank chassis. In the same way, self-propelled anti-tank guns such as the Jagdpanzer IV and Jagdpanther. Some designs were based on existing chassis, such as the Brumba, leftover chassis from cancelled programs, Elephant and Stra Emil. Others were converted from battle-damaged tanks, Sturmtiger. The single most produced armored fighting vehicle design for Germany in WW2, the Sturmgeschütze 3, Stu G3, assault gun, in 1936-37 pioneered the later casemate-style fully enclosed armor that would be used on almost all late-war German self-propelled artillery and Jagdpanzer format tank destroyers. The Soviets experimented with truck and tank-based self-propelled weapons, producing a few Komsomolets tractor-mounted 57mm ES-2 guns early in the war. By 1943, the series of Samochodnaya Ustanovka casemate armored vehicles had started to appear at the front, starting with the Su-85, and by late 1944 the Su-100, which mounted powerful guns on modern chassis adopting the full casemate enclosure off the crew compartment as the Germans had done with the Stu G3. These had the advantage of being relatively cheap to build and mounting a larger gun compared to the conventional tank that they were derived from, but at the expense of flexibility. Heavily armored assault guns were designed to provide direct fire support to infantry in the face of enemy defenses. Although often similar to tank destroyers, they carried larger caliber guns with weaker anti-armor performance but capable of firing powerful heat projectiles. The German 105mm howitzer-armed Stu H-42 based on the Stu G3, and the immense 152mm howitzer-armed Soviet ISU-152, both fully casemated in the design, are examples of this type of self-propelled artillery. All major nations developed self-propelled artillery that would be able to provide indirect support while keeping pace with advancing armored formations. These were usually lightly armored vehicles with an open-topped hull, the US M7 Priest, British Sexton, 25 PDR, and German Wesp and Hummel being typical examples. A different route was chosen by the Soviets, who did not develop a specialized indirect fire vehicle, but following a tradition of dual-purpose towed artillery, built a series of versatile assault guns with indirect fire capabilities, example ISU-152. A related and novel program was the development of the Romanian Mariel M00 tank destroyer, armed with an M30 howitzer. A Katyusha rocket launcher version also existed. Soviet Katyusha self-propelled multiple rocket launchers, which were unarmored trucks with a simple rocket rack on the back, a cheap and crushingly effective weapon, provided area saturation was called for rather than accurate fire. The Axis powers had captured the Katyusha and made their own versions. Germany created the 8 cm Raketenwaffe, while Romania developed the Mariel tank destroyer, an early prototype of which was armed with the Katyusha. It also had self-propelled howitzer versions. 4.5. After the end of World War II, the assault gun fell from use with a general trend towards a single heavy gun-equipped vehicle, the main battle tank. Although some wheeled AFVs such as the South African Ruhrkat, the maneuver combat vehicle of the JGSDF, and the USM 1128 MGS, among others, are still developed with large caliber, direct fire weapons. Self-propelled indirect fire artillery remains important and continues to develop alongside the general purpose field gun. Mortars. IDF McMat 160mm mortar carrier, see post-war Sherman tanks, Many vehicles have used ancillary smoke mortars for local defense which project one or more smoke grenades in a pattern that allow steam to lay down a smoke screen some distance in order to conceal the vehicle from enemy observers. Mortar carriers are vehicles which carry a mortar as a primary weapon. Numerous vehicles have been used to mount mortars, from improvised civilian trucks used by insurgents, to modified IFVs, such as variants of the M3 half-track and M113 APC, to vehicles specifically intended to carry arm mortar, such as the 2S-31 Vina. The Israeli Makhmat is a mortar carrier based on the M4 Sherman tank chassis. The Russian army uses a 2S-40 Ulpan, Tulip, self-propelled 240mm heavy mortar. Patria Hägglunds, a joint venture between Finnish Patria and Swedish BAE Systems. Hägglunds manufactures AMOS, Advanced Mortar System, which is a 120mm automatic twin-barreled, breech-loaded mortar turret. There are also numerals of FS and even MBTs that can be equipped with a mortar, either outside or inside of the cabin. The Israeli Merkava MBT carried a 60mm mortar in the small troop compartment in the rear, which fired through an opening in the roof, allowing the crew to remain protected. This was useful for fighting nearby infantry, as a mortar is shorter-ranged and cheaper to shoot than the large main gun, as well as being better suited to wounding enemy infantry taking cover behind objects. However, since the mortar is only a secondary weapon in this case, the Merkava is not considered a mortar carrier. Howitzers and guns. Self-propelled artillery remains important in the equipment of many modern armies. It saw a significant role throughout the Cold War era conflicts and in the recent Gulf Wars. Modern SP artillery is highly computerized with the ability to self-survey firing positions using systems such as GPS and inertial navigation systems. This, in conjunction with digital fire control /ballistic computers and digital communications, allows individual guns to disperse over a wide area and still deliver rounds on. Slovak self-propelled 155mm howitzer model 2000 Zuzana, a Swedish band cannon, one target simultaneously with the other guns in their battery. These capabilities also increase survivability manyfold, as modern SP artillery can displace and avoid counter-battery fire much more quickly and effectively and, if desired, more frequently than previously possible. In conjunction with modern logistic systems, where the SP gun systems can track and report on ammunition consumption and levels, with similar navigation systems and palletized load dropping forward/lifting capabilities mean that the rapid displacement can occur without significant disruption to actual firing missions, as it is possible for the ammunition to keep up with guns. A modern battery of 6 guns, each firing 43 kilograms projectiles with a burst firing speed of 4 rounds per minute, can deliver over a ton of ordnance per minute for up to 4 minutes. This is an immense weight of fire, which can be delivered with very high accuracy. One example of the increased firepower provided by modern mobile howitzers is the latest version, the G6-52, of the 155mm G6 howitzer. It can fire up to 6 rounds in quick succession that will land nearly simultaneously. This is achieved by firing the shells at different trajectories so that the first round has the longest flight time and the last round the shortest. This is an improvement of the concept of MRSI, multiple rounds simultaneous impact, itself an enhancement of the earlier time on target, concept. The necessary repeat reloading is made possible by an automated ammunition feed system. 6. Rockets and missiles. Rockets have greater ranges and carry much more complex shells than guns, since there is less of a restriction on size, caliber. The MLRS can be used to saturate a large area with submunitions. German Panzerwaffe. German Panzerwaffe. American M270 MLRS conducts a rocket launch. American M270 MLRs conducts a rocket launch. See also. List of artillery.
Let's stop because the video splits in 10 seconds. Let's stop the video.